SAFM Literature with Karabo Khuleng.
It's time now to talk about Bodyhood. Now, the poems in this book open widely to the inside while looking outwards at the connecting points of body and being, in love, in feeling, in the entanglements of desire, and in the many felt senses of human cross-connection. At once reflective, wistful, wry, and ironic, they chart the individual's imprint on a world accessible only through the bonds and affiliations of an embodied life. Now, this book makes me feel alive. You know, it captures in the most beautiful poetry the different elements of what it is to inhabit our bodies in this existence, in this space. And these are poems by Leon de Kock, who's in our studio in Johannesburg. I'm missing out. I should be in Joburg right now. Leon, welcome to SAFM Literature.
Thank you, Karabo.
Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you so much for coming in.
It's a great pleasure.
Now, I want to talk about an opening line right at the beginning of the book. It's what Humberto Maturana et al. 1995 saying, "We human beings are languaging beings."
Yes.
And our humanness takes place in language. Therefore, we human beings exist as systemic entities in the dynamic mutual modulation of our particular bodyhood. When did you come across this concept of bodyhood, Leon?
Well, I suppose bodyhood is a concept that I've always lived, but I was most interested to come across this man, Umberto Maturana, who does a very interesting thing. He does a biological construction of human life, and he talks about love and the necessity for love, and within a sense of bodyhood, in a way that is entirely biological. So if you think of popular constructions of love, it's often in the pop song kind of way, or it's in a moralistic way, or spiritual, religious, Christian kind of way, which exhorts you to behave in certain ways. Whereas Maturana looks at love as a biological necessity or a biological imperative. And I mean, without trying to explain this very complex theory here, just to say that he rejects all notions of objective reality. He sees human beings as determined in a sense by what he calls this mutual dynamic modulation, each in relation to the other. So human beings are encased in bodies with fleshy feelings, and they perturb each other, they affect each other by their actions, and depending on how you allow yourself and others to arise in the body and in the relation of your body and everything that's in your attitude and your inclination and your bearing, which is this kind of relatedness that he's talking about, people either arise in a similar kind of modulation with you in a loving bodyhood, or they wither or they die in a rejecting kind of bodyhood. So it's a very interesting theory about how our very way of being in the world is a function of the body and the way one lives through one's body. And I've always been I was very interested to discover this man as a biologist, and I found a lot of sympathy in what he was saying with other parts of what I was reading and trying to understand.
And it's a fascinating concept, because when you think about, the experience of the body, you also think about the sense of touch.
Yes.
There's been some interesting research, for example, that speaks to how if newborn babies are separated and they're not touched and held,
yes,
it actually increases their chance of them dying, because we need to feel connected, we need to touch, we need to feel,
yes.
and also the notion of separation as well arises because we have the sense of touching and feeling. And there's a poem here, "Cut Your Losses," that makes me think about the separation and what you do about it. When you say cut your losses, you say to yourself, minimize damage, make the most of things. Others have it a lot worse. Cut your losses, hack them off, or clean slice them. Can you tell us about where this poem came from?
Well, can I talk a little about what you said first,
Yeah.
which is about separation and the need for touch. What I find really interesting, and which feeds into this concept of bodyhood, is that although we are, you sitting there and me sitting here, we inhabit bodies, and we can only live through these bodies, and we are ultimately nothing but these bodies. We also somehow are extremely alienated from our own bodies, in the sense that we've either been led through culture or through religion or through philosophy to an understanding of our own body that tends to distance ourselves from those bodies. So, for example, if you've grown up a Protestant, which I almost did, then you're taught that you have to earn your bread by the sweat of your brow. Now, earning your bread by the sweat of your brow implies that the body is not a place for indulgence or pleasure. That's something to be avoided. The body is a tool to drive and whip and work so that you can fully earn your bread, and let alone your pleasure. Even if you look at Catholicism, and I sort of half grew up in the system of Catholicism, the body is a site of guilt. The body is a place which leads you into the confession booth because you dared to take pleasure in the sinfulness of the flesh. So the body, in that understanding, is a very difficult and dreaded place. Even if you're a Buddhist, to a large extent, you are taught that desire is, in many senses, a black hole. It causes suffering. So desire and being in the body is something to be avoided. You need to be more spiritual. If you're a 20th century rationalist, a Western kind of thinker, and you come all the way from Descartes, I think, therefore I am, kind of mind-body dualism, well then, you're actually in the head, not in the body. And you shouldn't be in the body because it's much better and more superior to be in the head. So what I'm saying is there are very few models of understanding and acting, and that's how we regard things in the world, is through these models of understanding and acting that allow us to fully inhabit the bodies in which we live. There are very few models out there that let us just be this fleshy, suffering and joyful coagulation of things without this kind of alienation. So to get back to what you're saying about touch, some people forget that it's important to touch. Some people are unable to touch other people. Some people are so culturally alienated from their own bodies and from the notion of pleasure that it's very hard for them to get back into the simple notion of a complete existence within an embodied, feeling, vital kind of life. So, I mean, that poem you read, of course, it touches on a moment from a completely different angle. It touches on a moment of pain, which, of course, is also part of one's existence and one's life in a body, and which you also have to fully live into. And this book does take many different moments and many different moods in relation to what it is and what it feels like and what it means to live in a body, and that's one of them.